So, after World War II, the entire world was just reeling, trying to make sense of an unimaginable horror. The leaders of the Nazi regime were put on trial at Nuremberg. And yeah, those trials were absolutely necessary, but they couldn't really answer the one question that was burning in everyone's mind.
I mean, how does this happen? Were these men just born monsters? Some kind of different species from the rest of us? Or was something else going on? This question, it just haunted everyone. And it went way deeper than any courtroom could go. But one psychologist, she believed she'd found a way to peek behind the curtain.
You see, while the judges and prosecutors were focused on their actions and their crimes, a psychologist named Florence Miale started a totally different kind of investigation. She wasn't looking at what they did. She was trying to map out the psychological landscape that allowed them to do it in the first place.
And this gets us right to the heart of the matter for Miale. Was she dealing with inhuman monsters? Or were they something far more terrifying? Were they just men?
Now, it's really tempting, right, to just write them off as pure, inhuman evil. It separates them from us. But Miale's work pointed to a much more disturbing reality, something the political theorist Hannah Arendt would later call the banality of evil. The idea that true evil doesn't always show up with fangs and a cape. Sometimes it's just ordinary. It's the evil that comes from regular people in a system, people who are just following orders and decide that obedience is more important than their own conscience.
So think about it. How do you possibly get inside the head of someone who has built these massive walls of denial and self-justification around themselves? Well, Miale had a very specific and pretty powerful tool for the job.
The Rorschach test. You've probably seen it in movies, right? The famous inkblots. The idea is pretty simple. You show someone an abstract inkblot, and you ask them, what do you see? And since there's no right or wrong answer, what they describe is believed to be a projection of their own subconscious mind, their hidden thoughts, their fears, their real emotional state.
For Miale, this was more than just a test. It was like a key, a way to get past all the prepared speeches, the courtroom lies, and the public personas, to get a real glimpse of the machinery whirring away inside their minds.
And as she went through the results, from one leader to the next, she started to see these really unsettling patterns emerge. And these patterns, they weren't about some kind of supernatural, monstrous evil. No, they were about something far, far more common.
Here's the core of what she found, and it's a bombshell. This mindset, this tendency to just obey authority no matter what, it wasn't just found in the guys at the very top. It was everywhere, at all levels of the system. The psychology was basically the same, whether you were a 4-star general or a file clerk.
And this is a perfect, chilling example of something that was later proven in Stanley Milgram's famous shock experiments. You know, the ones where ordinary people, when told to by a person in a lab coat, would keep delivering what they thought were painful, even deadly electric shocks to another person. Miale was seeing the real-world horrifying consequences of that exact same psychological wiring.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating, because this pattern becomes crystal clear when you dig into the individual case files. It's in the specific, weird little responses that the cracks in their psyche really start to show.
Let's start with a big one, Hermann Goering. This guy was the head of the German Air Force, Hitler's chosen successor, just this larger-than-life personality known for his charm and his bravado.
So he's shown one of these inkblots. Most people see a bat or a butterfly, maybe a moth. Goring's response? A funny beetle. That's it. It sounds like nothing, right? Just a random jokey comment. But for Miale, this was a huge red flag.
So here's how she broke it down. The humor, she believed, was a defense mechanism, a way to just laugh everything off and avoid taking any of it, especially his own guilt, seriously. And the choice of a beetle? Not a majestic eagle or a powerful lion, a beetle, an insect we associate with filth and decay. Miale saw this as a subconscious confession of his own moral rot, revealing a deep, deep insecurity hiding under all that bluster. All right, let's look at another one. Hans Frank, a man they called the Butcher of Poland. He ran the ghettos, was directly responsible for the murder of millions, and he was known for these wild, manic-depressive mood swings. His response to an inkblot was, well, it was just bizarre. Instead of saying what he saw, the image made him start talking about a flower. And he didn't just mention a flower, he launched into this long, detailed, and completely detached critique of its beauty, its shape, its color. Here's a man on trial for genocide, and he's dissecting aesthetics.
Miale saw this as a sign of a mind that was just shattered. His ability to talk about beauty with such intellectual precision while being completely blind to his own moral ugliness was staggering. For her, the flower represented life, vitality. And his response, this cold analysis, showed he couldn't actually connect with it at all, a perfect reflection of the cold, dead ugliness of his own action.
So when you put all these cases together, Miale came to a really powerful conclusion about the men who ran the Third Reich. But this is also where we need to take a step back and add a really important dose of perspective.
The common thread she found was this deep psychological sickness, a kind of emotional numbness that let them wall off their actions from their feelings, a powerful state of denial about reality, and a total inability to feel empathy or connect with other living things. They weren't monsters in the fairy tale sense. They were profoundly, deeply broken men.
But, and you can't miss this part, Miale's work itself shows that their psychology is just one slice of a much bigger, much more complicated pie. To really get why the Holocaust happened, you have to look at the whole thing: the political chaos of the time, the powerful propaganda, the economic desperation, the seductive ideology. The psychological flaws of these men were a key ingredient for sure, but they weren't the whole recipe.
And that brings us to the final and, maybe the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive into the human psyche. Because this isn't just about understanding some guys from the past. Miale's analysis is really a flashing red warning sign for all of us, right here, right now.
It's a warning about how surprisingly easy it is for any of us to switch off our moral compass when we're pressured by authority, when we get swept up in a system, or when we start to believe that just following orders is more important than listening to our own conscience. That line between being an ordinary person and becoming a part of something terrible, it can be terrifyingly thin.
So in the end, studying the Nuremberg Mind isn't really about them. It's about us. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask a really tough question. When the system around you demands your obedience, where do you draw your line?